Want to welcome everybody to this is a Zoom class, free class offered through the Computer Club. We have most of our classes now at the lab, also free, but we're still occasionally doing some classes over Zoom. And we want to thank Will Gerdick, who's going to be your presenter today, for offering to do this.
Well, thank you very much, Shelley. I appreciate it. I apologize for the noise in the background. I've got a puppy down here that's about 16 weeks old that just got spayed yesterday. So she's not really happy, and she just got fed. And, you know, what can I say? So hopefully she'll be quiet as we go through this. So let me share my screen and let's kick this off. I think you all can see my screen at this point. And tonight we're going to talk about how to organize your pictures and your documents. This is a class that I've done several times before, so I was fortunate enough to pull it up out of a older file and resurrect it a little bit and update it a little bit. So thanks for that opportunity. Okay. Resume, and let's see, are you going to work? There we go. Here's tonight's agenda. Through the course of the evening, we will be speaking to all of these points. What's a folder? What's a file? What's data? Where Windows expects to store things, the Microsoft storage hierarchy, planning and creating your folders and files. What's your plan for storing data? We'll talk a little bit about cloud services, because cloud services have become a big part of storing files. We'll talk about autoplay and photo transfers, and then I'll get into some best practices for storage and take some Q&A after that. If time allows, I've got a couple more things that I can talk about. So let's just jump right into it. So here's what we won't cover. We're not going to go through any application use other than opening of the existing data that's there. I won't give you any instructions on how to use basic hardware like your mouse, your touchscreen, how to boot, that kind of stuff. If you have questions on that, come see the people in the computer lab, and they'll help you with Windows basics and maybe recommend an intro to Windows class. I won't be talking about how to do any copying or pasting files or folders or transferring data to external devices. Again, that's Windows 101. So if you have any questions on that, the people in the lab can help you with that. I won't talk about external backup or external cloud management backup services. I will talk about cloud file services, but not backup services. And then I won't go into any advanced library management or advanced storage default configurations. Okay, it's always important to let you know what I'm using in terms of software for the workshop. If some of you are still using Windows 10, you will see some different things, and I'm not really going to jump into too much on Windows 10 anymore, since Windows 11 has been around for a couple of years, and we are moving forward down that path. The presentation was also created using the latest version of PowerPoint that was part of the Microsoft 365 online subscription. Again, there will be similarities and differences to what you see if you use Windows 10 or older versions of Microsoft Office. I'm not going to specifically call these out, and I'm not going to intentionally mention them as we go through, with one exception, and I'll get into that later on. It's in one of the slides. Okay, so let's begin by talking about what is data. Well, data is the personalized information used by software that is the result of the work you do. So when you do something with an application, you're creating a file that is personalized information. That personalized information could be pictures, could be documents, could be music, you could be saving emails, you could be getting stuff down off the internet. Anything that a software program creates is as part of its normal function as an application is considered data. So the data that's created by that application is stored as a file. A file has two parts, the name and the extension. The file name can be up to 256 characters long. It gets really messy if it gets that long, but I've seen them where they get, 100 characters or so. And sometimes it's just necessary to do that, but it's almost impossible to determine what it is unless you take a little hint that I've gotten here. I'll show you in a little while. File names are made up by the creator, the person that created the file or used the application, using upper and lowercase characters, numbers, and some symbols. Now, some symbols are not allowed because they're reserved for system use only. To see that list, the best way to do this is to do a search on characters not allowed in file names, and you'll get a whole list of them. But Microsoft helps you in this, because if you try to use an illegal character in a file name, the operating system will let you know and will prevent that file from being saved until corrected. So you really can't screw it up. So a file extension is preceded by a dot or a period, is generally up to 4 characters long, and should be linked or associated to a specific application on your system. For example, a file name might be called myfilename13.ppxt. I'm sorry, pptx. Clicking on a file associated with an application opens the file in that application, saving time for you. It is a wonderful shortcut. It opens the application right with that file, and off you can go. You can also do it the hard way. You can open the application and then search for the file, but most people tend to go to look for the file first and then launch the application through that file. It's important to note that several different applications may also have the ability to open the file, but only one of them is the default application association. So say, for instance, I've got a picture. That picture may have a .jpg, .jpeg, .gif, or .mov extension. Those extensions can be opened by several different tools, but only one of them is considered to be the default tool. So if I have a tool called like Microsoft Photos, if I have Photos as my default application, every time I click on an icon that's associated with a photo file, it will open in the photo application. I can use other applications for that as well, and I can change those applications. But the typical default one is the one that generally is installed first or comes from your system provider as the default tool. HP, Dell, Lenovo have their own applications for certain things and tend to associate those files with those things. So it really depends upon your system. So what's a folder? Well, a folder is a physical storage location somewhere on your system, okay? Where it is right now is not important. It is a container that you put a file in. You can also put other folders in there, so you can nest folders. A folder, again, it's just a storage location. It's designed to hold either files or folders. A folder name can also be up to 256 characters long and has the same restrictions as file names. You can't use some of the special characters. A folder doesn't have an extension though, and must never be preceded or followed by a dot. There's a reason for that, and if you put a dot in front of it, the system thinks that that's a hidden folder and won't let you see it again. So trying to get back to it is nearly impossible. You could get to it through the application, but then again, you'd have to have that application list, the data list in a recent area, and then you might be able to get it. Just don't do it. It saves yourself a lot of aggravation. Folders are seen by your system in what we call a hierarchical fashion. It's a stepped kind of a fashion. So for instance, you start at this level, and then you go down to this level, and then you go down to this level, and then you go down to this level, and so far and so far and so far. There really is no limit to the levels of steps you can do down within a folder. Of course, the more levels you put in there, the more difficult it is to find this stuff. And I can tell you that from practical experience, I've worked for businesses that are transferring data from one system to another system, and each business will have their own system limitations as to how far they choose to go. So when I was working out in the field, a business may say, we're only going 3 levels deep. But if they were to take over some data that came from another company that might have been 10 levels deep, after that 3 levels, the data's gone. It's not available any longer. So it's basically not transitioned. So try to keep it no lower than 5 levels deep. That means no more than 4 subfolders to the original folder. The other thing that I'll talk about more is cloud storage services, and folders can be linked as a virtual device to a cloud storage. Now that means we're taking a physical storage location and we're linking it to something up in the internet, something up in the cloud, and then it becomes a virtual connection to that service. Talk more about that in a little bit. Okay, where's Windows stores things? Now, beginning back with Windows XP, which was a long time ago, Microsoft created some folders at the installation of the system to store common items in special places. Now, one thing that's remained constant through the years is you aren't required to put the things that they expect in those locations. But over the years, it's been found that it is highly recommended to do that, because if you have problems and you try to go to Microsoft for help, they're not going to be of any help to you if your data is not in the places that they expect it to be. So it's really strongly recommended to put it where they recommend, and it's considered to be a best practice for storage. Your folders, your personal data folders, are under the system's current user folder, which is also called your named folder. Now, I'll show you why we call it the named folder in just a minute. That named folder changes names based upon who is currently logged into the system as the active user. So say I've got a computer that's got 3 people that can access that. Each one of them would have their own login, and when they logged in, their named folder would show up on the desktop. So there would be no crossover between data between each one of the users. They're all kept separately, and each user would get it as they logged in. Now, these folders that Microsoft created are called documents. Back in the Windows XP days, it was my documents, my pictures, my photos. They dropped that name over the years, and it's just plain called documents, pictures, videos, downloads, etc. I'll show you what that looks like in just a few minutes. When you create a document, here's the important thing. The system, Microsoft, will expect you to store it in the documents folder. Now, they don't care really where you store it in the documents folder. That's up to you, but they will expect it to be in the documents folder. Now, you can override that, but again, we don't necessarily recommend it. Now, what you could do is you can override which subfolder you want to put that in the documents folder. And that's easy enough to do. In fact, I'll even show you how to do that as we go forward. But you probably don't want to deviate from putting a document in the documents folder. And that means any kind of documents, anything from letters that you write or things that you create to PDFs that you get off the internet, or presentations that people send you, or whatever. All of that's considered a document and should go into the documents folder someplace. So what kind of stuff goes in these named folders? Well, in documents, as I mentioned, it's printed documents, PDFs, tax returns, recipes, genealogy, Quicken, all that kind of stuff. Anything basically that can't be figured out what to do. If it has a piece of paper or could have a piece of paper associated with it, it belongs in the documents folder, whether or not it has it paper or not. If it could be a piece of paper, it should be in the documents folder. Music is any kind of music you can think of, MP3s, WAV files, any of that kind of stuff. Pictures, in the old days, we called it photos, but now we call it pictures. Those are all pictures that you take or that come to you off the internet. All of those should go into pictures. Now, the next one is downloads. If you happen to see a picture that's sent to you on an email, it's going to wind up in the downloads folder. The downloads folder is temporary storage of anything that comes off the internet. When I say temporary, I mean it's designed to be not the permanent place you want to keep it. Nothing will ever empty your downloads folder. But if you want to take that picture that you just got from Aunt Susie, you need to go to the downloads folder, find that picture, and move it over to your pictures folder so it can be synced up with the rest of your pictures and keep everything in alignment. The contacts folder are for Microsoft-based contacts. That means things that were created with Microsoft contact tools like Outlook. Favorites, there's a favorites folder. That's where your Microsoft Edge and the old Internet Explorer favorites went to. It does not include things from Firefox, Chrome, or other browsers. So don't think that it does. I don't know what your preference is in using a browser. I personally use Chrome for almost all of my work. But if I were to go into Edge, the favorite section, I might find a couple of favorites in there. There's very few that I use, but I might find a couple in there. My default browser happens to be Chrome, so that's the one I choose to use. Right now, there's so much similarity between Chrome and Edge in terms of what the browsers can do and the things that they can run, because they both run off the same basic software engine called Chromium. It's a licensed open source kind of a tool, and both Microsoft and Google have decided to partner and use it in their primary browser tools. So more on Windows, where Windows stores things. The tool that we would use to see where that stuff is stored is called Windows File Explorer. Now, again, I will spend some time and show you how this works, but this is a wonderful place to go if you want to manipulate the contents of these folders. You want to move them from one place to another. You want to copy them. You want to put them somewhere else. It's easy to do. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and we'll get into this in just a second. If you don't have a named folder on your desktop, you can put one in. The way to do that is you go to Settings, Personalization, Themes, and then the thing you want to click on is in the Themes page. It's called Desktop Icon Settings. Okay, we'll go there in just a minute so I can show you how to do it. You can also create desktop shortcuts for the named folders, like your document folders, your photos, your downloads, and you can even create them for some of your cloud storage services. I've got one for Google My Drive, for my Apple Drive folders, and my Dropbox folders. Okay, time for demo. Let's see if I can get this out of here. And okay, now this is my desktop. I want you to notice that over here on the upper left-hand corner, you've got a folder here that looks like a person and has my name under it. That is my named folder. It is based on the name that I used when I logged in. So when I set up my account, it asked me who's going to be the user of the account. I put in Will, and it uses Will as the place where it's going to keep my data. Now, if I open that folder by double clicking on it, and it opened in another window. What did I do? I grabbed the wrong window. Sorry. This is the contents of my named folder. See, it says right there, that's the name. And in there, it's got some things that I would use on a normal basis and some things that I would never use on a normal basis, like 3D objects. That's used for some sort of special folder for a special application that does like something that would do like 3D printing. I have no idea what Ansel is. You notice that when I hover over it, it says that it's an empty folder. And it was created well over a year ago. I could probably easily eliminate that folder and we can move on. As I mentioned, contacts are there. This is an empty folder as well because I don't use Microsoft Contact tools. I use everything in Google. I use Google Contacts, Gmail, so I keep everything on that side of the house. Desktop. Now, this is something that's interesting. When I click and open the desktop folder, what I get is all of the stuff that you currently see on the desktop. So if you notice that when I move this down here, you can see that I've got, here it says I've got a folder called maintenance. There it is. I've got a folder here that says pictures from Windows 7 desktop. It's right there. I've got another folder for saved website. That's over here. I've also got some data there. There's a Microsoft Word file. You see that? You can tell it's a Word file because it's got a little icon that has a W on it. I've got some shortcuts that are there that take me to other places. I've got shortcuts that'll take me to the web. How do I know that's going to take me to the web? Because it's showing Chrome as the associated application to use when I click on this icon. And if you notice when I hover over it, it says it's going to take me to foodnetwork.com. So these icons are more than just for show. They really tell you a lot of information. The thing that I really wanted to stress in this is that this is not only what you see when you log in, but it also is a valid place to store things. And this proves it. I am storing things in a folder in my named folder in the desktop folder. All of these things are being stored there. And I've got a document, I've got shortcuts, I've got whatever. I even have folders inside of that. So you get the idea that this is a storage location of its own. Let me go back to my named folder and we'll go into the document section. And I'm just viewing it here differently. I can view it this way, or I can go up here to the view option and change it to large icons, or I can change it to great details where I get all of the, I get the information, plus I get the last date that it was modified and what it is. Say, for instance, these notice here, these are all file folders, but this is a file. Okay, so that's kind of what it is. Now, in documents, you would expect to see documents, and that's exactly what you see. You see all kinds of folders that are in here. Now, if I, for instance, were to click in, let me click in AVP Music. You notice there's more folders in there. Okay, and if I were to click in active, and these are all folders that I've created for specific purposes. So if I click in active, I have a list of all the active things that are happening within the barbershop chorus that I sing in. These are all the songs that we currently are doing and preparing for our shows this summer. If I click the item right above that, I go back up to it. I can go back up to this way. We call these breadcrumbs. So here's the first breadcrumb. Here's the second breadcrumb. If I click into, let's go down here a little further. Kingston backup. I've got another breadcrumb. If I click into this one, now this one's interesting. You notice that it's entered with a date. I created this folder back in 2015 on 5/15. This is a backup that I've taken from a drive, a flash drive, so I don't lose. In case that flash drive ever goes bye-bye on me, I can come back to it and take a look and see what was in it. And you notice that this flash drive had folders in it, it had files in it, it had all kinds of stuff in it. Okay. Again, I'm currently on the 2015-05-15 breadcrumb. I can go back to one. I can go back to another one. All right. So you kind of get the idea that it's a hierarchical fashion. If I go to downloads, as I mentioned earlier, this is a temporary area for storing files. Now, I will tell you that I never clean up my downloads file, my downloads folder. I never, ever do. Why? Because I have found over the years that I need to go back and find something that I've done. And if I have an idea of what the name is, I could go and find it. So say, for instance, I was looking for a download that I may have done, and I'm going to take a shot at this one. Nope, doesn't find anything. Yeah, I see. And these are all the folders that folders or items that have 86 in them. Someplace. Okay, so keep that in mind. When I do a search using the search tool, it doesn't necessarily give me exactly what I'm looking for, but it gives me at least a place to start looking. Notice I've got a whole bunch of things that look like pictures. This is a picture icon, and indeed they are. They're from our recent vacation to Disney. And I downloaded them off the internet. We did the Disney photo service, and we decided that we were going to do this in a way where it was we purchased the deal, and we downloaded them off the web. So if I wanted to open one of these, I would double click on the icon itself, not the name, but the icon, and there's the picture. Now, I want you to also notice on the left and on the right sides of my screen, I have little arrows. This gives me the capability of going to the next item in the list. So this one, we're currently looking at that one, and here's another view of the same thing, and here's another view. And as you can see, these were taken with different exposures and all kinds of things. So kind of gives you an idea that I can go through these. These are professionally taken, and this is what we did. Okay, so you get an idea, but I want you to note that this opened in the photo application that comes with Windows 11, because these photos that I've got in downloads are associated with that application. If I go back to that, I've got a favorites here, and I'd be surprised if there was something in here, and there's not, because I don't use Microsoft Edge hardly for anything. So basically, I don't do that. Now, music, it's another story. I've got a lot of music in here, but you don't see it right here because it's broken down into areas where I've got it saved. So for instance, if I go into albums, I've got a whole list of albums by artist that I can pop open at any point in time. For instance, if I go to this one for Faith Hill, you find that I've got one album called Fireflies, and if I wanted to play a song with one of those, I would click on this icon, and there it is. And let's get rid of that quickly because that was really loud. I hope you could have heard that. I think people 3 towns away could have heard that. So you get an idea that I could use the breadcrumbs to go back one at a time, or I can just click where I want to go to start with. Pictures, I have tons and tons of pictures. I go back many years. Started capturing pictures in 2001 with digital camera, and I saved everything. I don't delete any pictures from anything. So I have pictures coming out the wazoo. Lots and lots of them. In fact, if I hover over this, it tells you that I've got 74.2 gigabytes of pictures. That's a lot of pictures. That's a lot. But it's still not overwhelming for my cloud services to back it up. So you get an idea of how this is all on my system. Now, I promised that I would show you, if you don't have a named folder, how to get one on your system. There's an easy shortcut down here. I use the search option and I will search for desktop icons. And the first thing that comes up is themes and related settings. It's a system setting. Notice it didn't come up with desktop icons, because desktop icons is actually part of this page's settings. So I will click on this and it will take me to the themes section. And I will scroll down a little bit and there's the desktop icon settings. So when I click on this, it opens another box. Now in this box, you'll see that I have several choices with check marks next to them. The check marks indicate that this is currently being used as a desktop icon. If I click on network, it'll put network on my screen, and it wasn't there before. Let me prove that to you. I have to click apply. I will go back to my screen. And if I can find it, there it is right there. It wasn't there before, and it is now. Now, what would I use the network for? Well, if I was going to be transferring information from one computer to another computer on my personal network. I wanted to print something. I wanted to, lots of things you can do with network, but that's a whole different class than this one. So you get an idea how to add that. Again, how did I do it? I searched for desktop icons and I opened the box and I made my choices. And to get rid of it, I will uncheck it, click apply, and I'm done. Excuse me. One more thing I wanted to show you, and this is something a lot of people ask me. How do I get a shortcut to appear if it doesn't appear automatically? So say, for instance, I wanted to take something in my named folder and turn it into an icon on my desktop. Now, what do we hear? This 3D objects thing. I said I wasn't using it. I can take this and put it on my desktop by right-clicking, show more options. And again, I'm in Windows 11. When I click on show more options, it thinks about it for a few minutes. It then comes up with the old Windows 10 menu, and I will select send to. Now in send to, one of the choices it has is send to the desktop or create a shortcut. When I click this, you'll notice that there's the 3D object shortcut that appeared on my desktop. Okay, how did I do that again? I went to right-clicked on this. I went to show more options. If you're using Windows 10, this is what you would see if you did a right click, do send to, and went up to I didn't even see it. Anyway, that's a basic idea of how to do it. I'm probably blocking something here that's preventing me to do that. Let me try that again. This also might be a protected folder. I may not be able to do that. Send to, yeah, I'll bet it is. I'll bet it's protected. Oh no, there it is, desktop. And if I go, there's the contacts up there on the top. Now delete these, all I have to do is just highlight it and hit the delete button. I'm like, if I can get to the icon, I highlight it and hit the delete button and it goes away. This one I can't get to because the Zoom menu is on top of it, but I'll delete it later. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. All right, I promised I would show you some File Explorer basics. So let me open File Explorer. I'll do that by opening this window, which I have in existence already. Now, I'm going to show you something. For right now, forget about this section here. I want you to notice that this has been retracted. This happens to be my OneDrive cloud service. But these are all the places in my named folder that are currently what we call they're pinned in place. They're called pinned because they have these little pins next to them. These will always stay there when I boot my system. These down here that are not pinned are temporary, and they're based upon how often I access them. The more often I access a folder, the higher it climbs in the rank, and the sooner it'll show up at the bottom here. Now, I also want to show you that there are several other places that File Explorer has flagged. I've got a folder called Dropbox, one called iCloud Drive, one called iCloud Photos. These are, again, all cloud drives, and we'll talk about those later. Now, if we take a look at this PC, we're starting to look at the physical devices inside the PC. One of them happens to be a disk drive, which the system calls C. Another one is a disk drive called E. Another one called F. Another one called G. Another one called H. And then I've got another one called I. I've got a lot of drives. And the question is why would I ever want to do that? Well, I use these drives for various different things. But I do a data backup for my own preservation. It's old habits. It just, they last forever. And so I keep a backup of all my data on a separate drive. One of them is to keep a backup of images. Every now and then I do an image, a snapshot of my system, so I keep that image. So if I ever have to restore my system quickly, I can do that using some special software. Several reasons I've got that, but you can see inside of these. Now, if you notice, if I click in, let's go to images. If I open images up, I've got two folders in there. One called images, and these are all the systems that I currently am imaging and working on. Hang on just a second. I need to let my puppy down. You go by mama? Okay. Go ahead. Go by mama. They've been fed. She's still too little to leave on her own. Can't be sure what she's going to get into. Anyway, you get the general idea. If I go into this particular one, I've got two different operating systems that I'm imaging. Here's all the different image files that I've done, and you kind of get an idea as to what the system's doing. How do I know when these were done? I take a look at the date modified. These are all the dates that they were done. Now, I want you to notice that they are not in chronological order. They're sorted in order of the file name. But if I want to put them in chronological order, all I have to do is click on the column heading, and you notice it puts it in reverse order, or I can click on it again and put it in forward order. So I can do any of that. I can do the same thing with type. I can do type based upon file, or I can do it based upon size. So these columns are very helpful in helping sorting data to make it more useful. What else can I show you? That's kind of it for right now. I just want to let you know that these are all shortcuts to get me to these places quickly. If I click on pictures, it'll take me right to all my pictures. Okay, let's continue with where we are. I will resume this from the current slide. Okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about cloud-based storage. Now, I want to mention that there were folders for the cloud services where I have accounts. There were folders in there, a folder for Dropbox, a folder for My Drive, which is Google's version of the cloud. I have iCloud folders and iCloud Drive, which are really two separate things. But if you go to your iCloud Drive website, you'll see photos inside of them. So Microsoft splits them. I'm sorry, Apple just splits them out based upon what they're currently doing. I also have a folder in there for OneDrive. I'll talk more about this very soon. So there's a couple of folders that are not used by your named folder, but they exist. Now there's one called videos. It's been around for several versions of Windows, but Microsoft just hasn't embraced the default placement of videos into this folder. You can use it, but if you choose to use it, you have to put files there yourself. You have to copy them and paste them or physically move them from one folder into another one. Perfect situation would be to do that would be you get a video from somebody on the internet. It would wind up in your download. If you want to keep it, you can take and drag that file into the videos folder, and it'll move out of the downloads folder and move it into the videos folder. Most people honestly just ignore the videos folder, and they allow movies and videos to be put in the pictures folder. So if you go into my pictures folder, you'll see a lot of videos and other things like that. Folder naming. Now, a user created folder can be named to whatever the user chooses. I'm stipulating that because you cannot change the name of the Microsoft provided folders. You can't change the name documents. You cannot change the name downloads. You can change the name of your named folder, but it's awkward. It's awkward, but you can do it. But it's not something a regular user would want to do. Folder naming uses similar requirements to naming of files, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. Just like in real life, folders can be located within folders. I've demonstrated that already. The inside folders are sometimes called subfolders. File naming. File names are chosen by the user. A file name should be descriptive enough for the user to describe the work stored in the file. So if I take a look at a file and it's called DSC00285.jpg, would I have any idea what that is? No. That is a system generated file name generated by a camera or by a mobile device. And that's the format it uses. So when I take a look at my photos, I leave the file names the same, but I generally give myself icons where I can tell what the picture looks like. File names must follow the 256 character and special symbol limitations and will automatically have a created extension if it's created by an application. So again, if you take a picture, whatever the device is that's taking the picture will create the extension. The extension will probably be JPG or JPEG or GIF. But again, it's created by the device that created it. We'll talk again. We can change an extension, but it's not recommended because it'll break the link to the application, and that file won't open with that application anymore. It'll basically become an unassociated file, and it makes it difficult to open it with anything. We'll talk about file naming best practices in just a little while. Now, file extensions, more on this. They're important. A lot of times they don't even show up in your system because they've been turned off. I think that's atrocious. I think that users are smart enough to know what kind of things are opened with your system and what application is used for a given file type. But I'll show you how to change that. most of the time, we find users going to File Explorer to find their data. They know where it's stored. It's quicker for them to go through the graphic tool to find the file they're looking for inside documents, inside the subfolder, inside the other subfolder, inside the other they know pretty much where the trail is. It's quicker for them to see it because it's more graphical. You can do that with the application, but the size of the window is much smaller. So, and you can't make it larger. So the problem is that you don't see everything in the application to get that file that you do in File Explorer. So in File Explorer, you've got a picture with that icon at the beginning of the file name. That's the application that's used when the data is opened up. We call these kinds of files associated to the application. Now, it's important to remember that you click on the icon, not on the actual name. If you click on the icon, it will always open the file in the application. If you click on the name, it might give you the option to rename the file. And I'll talk about that in a little while. But it's just not something you want to do. You don't want to click on the name, and that's a newbie experience. New users click on names a lot, and then they screw themselves up. They change the name, they don't mean to, and they don't know how to get out of that. Now, the thing that I need to point out is there are hundreds of extensions that can be used in the many different file application categories. They're all over. They are all over. Each application may have its own icon. There are probably 4 or 5 photo management applications on my system. There are many document managements. There are a couple of financial. I don't do genealogies. There's different web pages. I do some stuff in Firefox. I do some stuff. I save some stuff in Chrome, some stuff in Internet Explorer, the older stuff. There are many different kinds of audio players and recorders, Office tools, Microsoft Office, Google Office, go back into WordPerfect, even those kinds of things. All of those things exist over the years and they don't disappear. They're actually registered with Microsoft so that no one else can use them. So it gives you an idea how vast the collection is. Now, to move forward, I want you to consider the following story information to better understand how Microsoft stores things in your computer, okay? So I want you to think about a room with a file cabinet in it. And the file cabinet has got 3 drawers in it. It's got a top drawer, a middle drawer, and a bottom drawer. In each drawer, there are file folders. Now, you've all seen file folders. You know what they look like. They're those things with the little metal tips on the end and they hang on the racks, okay? If they're organized well, on the back or the front of each one of those file folders is the little label at the top. So you can see what's in that file folder. You can get a category. So maybe this one's called financial, or maybe this one's called pictures, or maybe this one's called insurance. And each one of those folders would have a specific meaning. Inside of those folders are generally documents. That's what goes in file cabinets, it's documents. Now, if you, for instance, if you were doing financial, maybe you've got a file folder for every month inside that financial. And so you have 12 file folders inside that financial folder, one for each month. And inside each one of those file folders, you'd have the documents for that month. Same concept with the middle drawer, same concept with the bottom drawer. A computer is similar in storage. It uses a hierarchical storage practice where you've got the computer, a primary hard drive, a secondary storage device, and a third storage device. Okay, so if I were to equate this, the file cabinet and the computer are the same thing. The top drawer is equivalent to the primary hard drive. The middle drawer is equivalent to the second storage device, drive D. And the bottom drawer is associated with drive E. So you kind of get an idea that having paper and having a computer is very similar. Now, say I wanted to tell somebody to go find a file in one of those cabinets. Where would I go to tell him to go do this? Well, I'd probably tell him to go to the file room, to a specific cabinet, to a drawer, to a folder in that drawer, and go find the document. So if we were to label that, it would look like this. The room would be Lab 01. The cabinet is number 12. It's in the bottom drawer. It's in a miscellaneous folder, and the document's called FileNet. Similar to a computer, it's very similar. It's instead of the room, it's the system name, followed by the device letter, followed by the folder name or subfolder name, and then the file name. So it's very similar. And it looks like this. Lab 01, C, system, system 32, filenet.doc. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about how to create folders in the documents location. I'm going to show you a way how to do it. I'm going to show you 3 ways how to rename a folder. And I'm going to show you how to rename file names as well. So let me get out of this. And let's go over. And I said we were going to do this in the documents folder, so I will open documents. Okay, now 3 ways. Oh, geez. Can I get rid of this thing? Hang on a second. Floating meeting controls. There we go. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Okay, so I want to create a new folder. Well, the easiest way to do this is up here in the upper left-hand corner, an icon called New. And if I click on this little down arrow right next to it, it asks me, what new thing do I want to create? Well, I want to create a folder, so I click on Folder. Shows up at the bottom. It's in blue highlighted white text. And it is waiting right now for me to name it. Okay. Now, if I choose not to name it and just hit the Enter key, I will wind up with a folder called New Folder. Now, I'm sure if you take a look at your system, you'll find lots of folders called New Folder. New Folder, New Folder 1, New Folder 2, New Folder 3, New Folder 4, etc. Every time a folder has the same name, Microsoft assigns a number to it. So you know that they're not the same folder. They're actually different folders. Now, by leaving this as it is, I can type the name in, and I'm just going to put some numbers in this because I want it to show up at the top. So I'm going to put 200300412. Okay, and I'll click the Enter button, and it disappeared. Well, no, it didn't. It went up to the top of the list because I'm sorted by the name of the folders. Okay, now say for instance I screwed that up and I didn't want to change the name, or I typed it in wrong, because if you notice, what do I have in here? 2003, it's 2023. How do I fix that? Well, one way is I just click on the name itself. And you see I got my blue box back there. I can then either click in there and backspace over to it and fix it. Or I could have moved my cursor over to that section and fixed it directly there. When I hit the Enter, the folder name has changed. Same thing with files. That exact trick works the same. Now, if I wanted to change it another way, what I would do is I would use my right mouse button again. Maybe. Come on, computer, you can do it. There it is. And I would go to Show More Options. And in show more options, I have the opportunity to rename that file. See right there, if I click rename, all it does is the same thing as it did when I clicked on the name itself. So it's just another way to get to the rename option. I'm going to show you a third way, which you almost will never, ever do, but it's called the properties of the folder. Everything that's listed in your computer is an object, and objects have specific properties. So if I right click on this, again, I come up with show more options. There it is, properties. What this is this tells me all about the object that's called 2023-0412. And at this point right here, it tells me all kinds of things that I never really cared to know about. But right here, if I want to, I can change it right there and click OK. And it changed it right there on the fly. So there's 3 ways of changing it. Now, that's everything I promised. First 2 methods, the clicking on the name and clicking on the submenu with the right click work just fine. Properties can be done, but it's a little more awkward and there's more chance of screwing things up. So I wouldn't recommend you do that for file names. One thing I do want to make sure that you don't do, and I'm going to go into this folder for right now. Oh, come on. See, I did it too. I clicked on the name and not the icon. If I go into a particular file and I change it, now you notice these are all here as PDFs. That means that the application that runs my PDFs, that handles my PDFs, will open that. And that application is called Christmas. I can't remember it. Well, let's just open it and find out. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Well, it's opened it. I just don't know where. Bad example. All right, let's just say that I want to take this and I click on the name of it. Now you notice that the title, the name is the thing that's highlighted, but I can also click into the box while it's still in the editing mode and change the name. So if I change it to a doc, that would say, instead of using my PDF tool, it's now going to use the default word processing tool, which in my system happens to be Microsoft Office. Now, when I click enter, it's going to tell me, are you sure you want to do this? Well, for my purposes, I want to, because I want to show you what happens. When I do that, you notice that the icon changed from this one to this one. But if I try to open the file using the tool, it tells me it can't do it. It's telling me it can't do it. It doesn't understand the file content. So that's why it's not advisable to change an extension, because it may not be able to do it. And let me go back and change this. Now, the nice thing about this is the tool that created this PDF automatically named it, so I don't have to worry about that. All right, let's move on. Okay. I want to talk about some file naming best practices. Now, these are not required, but this really should be something that will help you place your documents in a location where you can go find them again. And think about all of those pictures that I've got. How would I ever be able to find a specific one if I didn't know where to start looking? Because they all start with DSC. And I've got hundreds of pictures there. So how would I find the right one? Well, I'll show you. A file name, first off, should be descriptive enough for the user to understand what the purpose is. So it should also be constructed in a manner that can be distinguished from a similar file name. I'll show you what that means just before we hit the end of the slide. So to begin, I would determine where, and that means in which folder I want to store the file before doing my first save. Now, because I'm doing work for the computer club and the work is a presentation, I'll put my presentation in the SCHCC folder in Documents. I have a folder called SCHCC, and it is in the Documents folder. Okay. I have a personal file naming plan, and it's rigid. I name all of my documents with this type of a format. I begin by putting in the date in year, month, day format. I then give it enough of an idea as to what this thing is. So if I'm looking for this again, I could click on organize, or I could click on, I could search on organize, or I can search on documents, and I would probably find this as one of the choices. I then, once I've got that information entered in the application, I then click the save button on that application to save the file. Now, when I clicked on save, it saved it to the proper folder, and it also put the extension name on automatically. So this is what the file name looks like. 2023-04-10, how to organize your pictures and documents, .pptx. That .pptx says that this is a PowerPoint presentation. Now, I use this same format going forward. So if I were to take this file and change it today, because notice the date on this one is 2 years ago. I'm sorry, 2 days ago. If I were to modify this file today, I would keep the same file name description, but I'd use today's date at the front of the file name. That would show me that I would have two of these, how to organize your pictures and documents, one on the 12th and one on the 10th. I am doing two things with that. Number one, I'm keeping my files separate. In case I ever have a problem with one, I can go back to the old one. And number two, I know that I have a new version of the April 10th document. In the storage, in File Explorer, it'll list the 12 right above the 10 because that's part of the name of the file. And all I have to do is look in the SCHCC under the dates, and I would have a much better chance of knowing which one is the most current one. To best manage your data, you must develop a way to combine your style into Microsoft style. And unless you come up with a way to do it, you're going to be lost. You're never going to find your document. In the previous slide, I came up with a way where I'm using Microsoft's folders, but I'm also using my own folders. And I'm naming files in a way where I can find them again. So how do you do this? Well, you first have to do the analysis of what you have. So what do you have in your named folders? What's inside of all of those folders? How is it organized? Do you have documents within documents, or do you have music within documents? Do you have pictures in documents? Do you have everything lumped together in documents? That's not unusual. But can you really find something? Can you break it down to a point where you can find things. Now, there is such a thing as overanalysis. You could break it down to the far depths of folders where you may never be able to find it again. So keep it at a level that you can use. And if you find that that's not working, you can always modify it. So say, for instance, let's use that example that I had earlier with the financial folder, and I had the 12 months, each one having its own folder. Well, let's just say that in January, I received 25 bills from 15 different vendors. I could lump those all together in a January folder, or I could create 15 other subfolders in January, and I could put those invoices in each one of those. So you kind of get an idea that I've got 15 folders and then 10 other documents that didn't fit into the folders. So you get an idea. It didn't work for me. I had to reorganize it. So I changed it. Now, do you have the same data in locations other than your named folder or subfolder? Sometimes you do. Can it be better named so you can find things? Probably. So what changes do you need to make? That's the analysis. You then make the choices. Do you want to store your information based on dates or by categories, or maybe both, or maybe some types as categories and others based upon dates? Your choice. This is your strategy. You're just keeping documents in the documents folder. After that, you've satisfied Microsoft's requirement. You're putting pictures in the pictures folder. You're just sorting it based upon your way of doing it. How you find those things and how you name them is really up to you. Then you implement your changes one folder at a time. So you take the old stuff and you put it in the new stuff. Okay, now, how do you do that? Well, first off, it's so important that I'll say this again. You do the analysis. You then develop your strategy, and then you implement your strategy and your plans in a new device and copy it over. If you don't have a secondary new device, I'll show you what to do in the next slide. So remember earlier I said you could keep information on your desktop? What I'm suggesting you do is you go to your desktop and you create a folder and call it new layout. And in this layout, you create a documents folder, a music folder, a pictures folder, a folder for everything you've got in your named folder. And then you create your subfolders in that based upon your strategy. Am I going to keep all my recipes together? Am I going to keep my Christmas letters together? What am I going to do with my tax documents? Are you going to have a folder for each one of those? Or are you going to do that based upon year? Your choice, your data. Okay. Lastly, what I'm suggesting you do is you go to the old stuff and you drag it into the new location, a folder at a time. And then you rename the file as necessary to make it agree with your strategy. Okay? Okay. So let's talk for a second about your pictures folder. I'm looking at the time here. I want to make sure there's just some time for Q&A. If you downloaded pictures from your camera, it's probably already been added to a folder that was dated by your download application. So when I plugged in my camera last week, it gave it the date of April 12th. Okay. And it put all the pictures in my camera in that folder. Well, that's all well and good, but it put them all in this kind of a format. I have no idea what they are. So I suggest you don't even try. Just name the folder. into something that's more convenient for you. Let me show you. I don't know if I even have. See, what I've done is these are things that have all been downloaded from my camera. And what it did is it downloaded the date, but didn't put any description in it. Well, that would do me no good unless I put a date in. So what I did is I went into it, I clicked on the name, and I just added vacation in San Diego. When I went into that folder, I had all of those folders that were all these names. Okay, so I would typically, I need to get this out of the way again. I'm floating. I need to change the view because this is the way it would look like if I went into that folder. This is the way the camera would leave it. Well, this doesn't do me any good. I can't tell what these things are. So rather than change the name of each one, which would be very tiring and very time consuming, I go to the view option here and tell it to show me in extra large icons. And now I can see what each one of these icons is. And I don't have to worry about naming them. So you get an idea that you go into the name, the dated folder, and you change the size. It makes no difference to the size of the picture. It's just the way you're viewing it. So that's made my life far easier. Okay. All right. Cloud storage. Now, this is a new addition to this presentation because cloud services 5 years ago really didn't exist. I mean, we had Dropbox and there was something called Microsoft Sync, and they didn't really work. And when they did work, it was a completely manual basis. So you just kind of said, well, the heck with it, and moved on. Today, that's not the case. There are several major tools that are directly integrated with all of your devices. There are desktop apps that can be installed on your Windows box, that can be installed on an Apple device, that can be installed on your mobile devices like your phones, your iPads, your tablets, that share this data completely among the devices. It just works. And it works so well that you don't have to worry about it. When all the files are the same everywhere, we call those folders being in sync. And that means that on my PC, I have a physical folder called Documents. It has a copy up in the cloud called Documents in my OneDrive folder in the cloud. I also have a folder on my system, a physical folder called iPhotos. Up in the cloud, up in the Apple side of the house, there is a folder there called Apple Photos. The two of them are completely separate. They never cross over. They are completely isolated. So, but the data is available with the proper tool. Now, I want to talk a little bit about pros and cons of non-Microsoft cloud storage. I have many of them because that's just the way I started using them 5 years ago. Today, I would probably just get rid of most of them and focus on two. I probably would use OneDrive, and I would use Apple's iCloud. The rest of them, I could easily switch over and not ever miss it. But I've gotten used to putting certain things in Dropbox, and so I use it. But I'm a creature of habit. So the pro is automated backup and sync of all the data files in monitored folders. So Dropbox, the cloud, monitors Dropbox, the folder on my system, and it makes sure that the data is consistent between it. The cons is that unless you pay for more, you're limited to 5 gigabytes. Now, 5 gigabytes sounds like a lot until you start putting stuff into it, and you will rapidly run out of storage. Just as an example, I started with Apple Backup using the 5 GB that they gave me. And between my iPad and my phone, I ran out of space for backup within the first 3 months. So I pay for storage at Apple to give me another 50 gig. And I now have 55 GB. I'm currently using about 35 of that space because I'm using the Apple Cloud for other things as well. But I've paid for it. Another con, you've got to have the desktop app installed on your Windows system and configured so it will talk to the cloud. That means that the Apple app has got to be configured to talk to the Apple Cloud. That the OneDrive app has got to be configured to talk to the OneDrive cloud. Okay, that means you've got to have accounts on those systems. So you've got to have a Microsoft account. You've got to have an Apple ID. You've got to have I've got a OneDrive account. It's just more stuff to remember. Storing data to the desktop app folder is a manual process. Microsoft does not designate where your data is stored. There is an exception to that, and I will get to that in a section. But if I put something in my documents folder and I want to put it in the Apple Cloud, I have got to physically take it from my documents folder and put it in the iCloud folder in my desktop, and then it will sync up. But it doesn't do it automatically. Okay. OneDrive is Microsoft's version. Now, the pro on this is it's an automatic backup and sync of all the data files in the specific monitored folders. It does most everything in your named account: desktop, documents, pictures, etc. You can also tell it to do downloads and other. Doesn't do it by default, but you configure it to do that. Pro comes with Windows 11, and you get 5 gigs of space. And with Microsoft 365, you get a terabyte of space. In Windows 10, it's an add-on. You have to go and add it on. You have to say, I want it, and then you have to install it. Again, you'll get your 5 gig of space, and it requires that you have a Microsoft account. Not everybody does. Another con, you're limited to 5 gig. You try to put in 5.5 gig, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Again, you've got to have the desktop app installed. Windows 11 includes it. It comes right with the operating system. And in fact, when you boot in the first time, it tells you to configure it. A huge con. OneDrive does not sync to the other cloud service folders to OneDrive. It just doesn't do it. I wish it did. And in fact, well, I'll get to the next one. It just doesn't sync with Dropbox. It doesn't sync with iCloud or iCloud folders. Now, let me talk for one more thing, and then I'll get into a reason why you've got a problem. Autoplay is something that came along, probably back in the age of Windows Vista. And it was a tool that when you inserted some sort of removable media device, a camera, a flash drive, an SD card into your computer, a window would open and ask you what you wanted to do with the pictures in that device. And in fact, in many cases, when Vista came out, it would automatically take pictures and put it in the pictures folder along with that date. And it did it in such a way where you didn't even know it. Well, unfortunately, in future versions of the operating system, it wasn't as automatic, and you had to go into the tool and configure it. You can configure it to open everything automatically. You can configure it to go to the file manager and let you see what's in there, or you can say, don't do anything because I'm really worried about the possibility of bringing a virus into my system. I want to see what this is before it downloads anything onto my system. That's fine. You can do any of those. You can search in your search bar on the bottom for autoplay, and it will take you to autoplay, and you can customize it based upon your choices. Now, back to photos. As I mentioned, OneDrive and your cloud services are separate, and nothing crosses over until you make it happen. You have to manually do it. Now, for example, I used a digital camera to take my pictures for years. And when I got back from vacation, I would take that card and I'd plug it into my PC. And I would make sure that that data, that picture data, got transferred into my folders, my named folders picture folder with the date of the transition. Now, that worked well. A couple of years ago, I stopped using my digital cameras and I switched over completely to my iPhone. Guess what? None of the pictures in my iPhone are in my PC. Well, that's not exactly true. They're in my PC because they're up in the Apple Cloud, and the Apple Cloud is in my PC, but I can't go to see all of them in one location. So what I have to do is I have to copy the Apple Pics over to my Pictures PC folder. Awkward. You'd think that these companies would integrate a little better. And my estimation, I think it's coming, but it's not here yet. Okay. Let me show you some of these cloud services quickly. I know we're running short of time. Okay, if I go into my named folder again, and I happen to click in my OneDrive folder, you'll see that I've got all the same stuff that's in my named folder. Okay, this information is in the local disk. So I can tell you right now, I know physically that it's stored physically on my hard drive. If I go up to the, and I'm going to cheat, I'm going to use File Explorer to take me into my OneDrive cloud account, you notice that I've got exactly the same thing. All of my data from the cloud is synced to my PC, and from my PC is synced up to the cloud. The nice thing about that is I can take any computer system that I've got, and I have several of them. I can log in to OneDrive and have instant access to all of my information. And my information, my data is on every PC that I carry. It's wonderful. I don't have to worry about carrying around thumb drives anymore. All I have to be able to do is to log into OneDrive, and I've got everything that I need right there. Why wouldn't you use OneDrive? For Apple, it is similar. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to hide this again. I'm going to go to the iCloud, which happens to be iCloud.com. And then it's going to make me sign in. And here's my home page. Now, from here, I can go to any one of a number of things. iCloud has the photo section. It's got a drive section where I keep all my stuff. It's got a mail that notice there's no messages because I've never used iCloud.com as a mail tool. And I can do all of these things real quickly. Here's a shortcut. So if I want to go to my drive, I can click on the drive. And it takes me to a graphical representation of stuff I've got up in the cloud. You notice that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 folders up there right now. And in these folders, I have things that I use in certain locations. I have applications that work better on Apple products. So I store it in an Apple format so I can take that application on my iPad and just access it directly. So it works so much easier for me. If it's Windows-based stuff, I use a PC, I use a laptop, or I've got a Surface. So you kind of get an idea there. Now, how did this happen? Well, let me see if I can find it. No. Well, I'm not having any luck, but there is an application that you download from Apple that allows you to set up iCloud with your PC, and you tell it how to configure it. And in my case, I told it to sync my pictures, my data, everything that's in my iCloud folder with my PC. iCloud Drive. There it is. Everything that I have up in the cloud is also on my PC. And if I put something in one of these folders, it will automatically go up to the drive. Dropbox is very similar. There's a Dropbox app, there's a Dropbox folder, and there's a Dropbox folder on my system. One more slide, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay, let's talk for a second about a review for best practices for naming data and file folders. Use a naming convention that's easy for you to understand and maintain some sort of versioning. The best way to do that is by using the date method. Year, month, day. Works perfectly. I've been doing it for years, and I rarely have a problem finding a piece of file that's even 10 years old. So it just works. Store items where Microsoft suggests and adapt your storage plan to work alongside the Microsoft strategy. Makes sense. Documents go in documents, pictures go in pictures. What happens after that is not Microsoft's problem. It's yours, but you can do anything you want to. Now, one thing you do need to think about, and I didn't mention, is that it is very easy to have duplicate files that are identical, same name, same extension, and same last date. You really want to get rid of those whenever possible. And there are some tools that are freeware that are out there you can get from oldergeeks.com. One's called Aldup, Clone Spy, or AntiTwin. Any one of those three are very good for finding and eliminating duplicates. If you do redo your file system, make sure you plan it first. Then create your new structure, copy over the old stuff to the new folder, and rename the file using your own naming convention. Once it's copied and it's working, you can do whatever you want to with the old stuff. You can delete it, you can keep it, whatever. You just have to make sure that going forward, you use that new plan and that you stick to it. Because if you don't, you're never going to be able to keep it up. And having data in two places is not fun because they won't talk to each other. Okay, I'd like to open this up for questions. Shelley, can you open up the
Yeah, if you'd like to pose a question for Will, just unmute yourself and then wait for Will to recognize you. Just need to click the mute button or hold down the space bar on your keyboard.
Hey, Will, Frank Sansoni. I just want to say great presentation as usual. Thank you.
Hi, Frank. It's nice to talk to you again. Thanks for attending.
Good to see you.
Anybody else?
Have any other questions yet? Just unmute yourselves and be happy to answer your questions.
Well, either I put you all, do we still have 50 people here? It doesn't look like it.
No, we're down a little at this point. Yeah, at one point we were as high as 57.
Wow. Well,
So,
either
we're quite a large
I-
group, yeah.
I bored them to tears or I lost them. But I'm hoping that it was understandable. One of the things that I would like you all to do, those of you that hung to the very end, is please let Shelley and Ralph know what you thought of the presentation. I know we went for an hour and a half, and I know that that's usually longer than what you do. But there's a lot of information in here, and this is an important thing for you to do. So please let them know about the delivery, about the content, and if there's any suggestions on how we might be able to improve this going forward, okay?
And let me also remind everybody, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we have a meeting. It's our general monthly meeting in Drendel for the Computer Club. We have a dual presentation. David Good will be talking about scams, and I will be talking about Microsoft Defender. And then on Friday, that's tomorrow morning. The presentation starts at 9:30, and if you come at 9, we've got plenty of coffee and donuts for you. And on Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock, this coming Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock in the lab, there's a rerunning of our Windows 11 class. I'll be doing the Windows 11 class. It'll be similar to the ones I've done in the past. What I do is I try to include some of the new features in Windows 11. So there will be some new content as well. Do we have any other questions for Will?
No?
Shelley, tomorrow, after the meeting in Drendel, the lab's going to be open till noon, and then 1 o'clock, there's a class on eBay.
Oh, cool. That's still around, huh? eBay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's another class tomorrow on eBay, yes. So if there's no other questions, I want to thank everyone for coming, and thank you, Will, for doing this presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking. I really do. Nice to see all my friends.
Okay, and with that, we'll call this a meeting, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.